Okay, so we're factoring trinomials. What I want you to realize is we are using this for the next bunch of units, which I know I've stressed to y'all, but like I want to keep stressing it. So some of y'all have learned other methods, and if those are the methods you want to use, that's fine as long as you show all your work. If you just have magic answers and you're like, oh, I do a different method, it's no. Okay, all the methods show work, so it doesn't matter which method you use, you have to show your work. So trinomials are just three terms. Okay, they're all quadratic because they're squared. Okay, and it has to be in order, and if there is a GCF, you have to take it out. Because if you don't take it out, you're making your life way harder. Okay, so we're going to do the box. We do start with the x, but that's just to find our split b term. Okay, so this is our first problem. So if you look at number 1, first things first, we always make sure it's in order, which it is. And we always make sure there's no GCF, which there's not. So we're good. We're going to find our A, our B, and our C. Now, when I ask you for A, B, and C, 99% of the time, you're not going to tell me letters. It's only going to be numbers. Okay, the only time there's going to be letters is if there's multiple letters inside your equation. This only has one letter, so there will be no letters in our A, B, and C. So what is my A? 1. It's whatever's in front of x squared. If there's nothing there, you can put a 1. What's B? And what's C? Perfect. So then we do our x. And on top of our x is our A times C, and on bottom is our B. Okay, A times C is 1 times negative 3, which is just negative 3. And B is negative 2. What multiplies to give you negative 3 and adds to give you negative 2? Well, negative 3 is prime. Well, 3 is prime. So 1 times 3 is your only factor. So negative 3 would be negative 1 times 3 or 1 times negative 3. Which one of those is going to add to negative 2? 1 times negative 3. So positive 1, negative 3. So then we draw our box. Now in your box, your first term goes in your first box. What's the first term of my quadratic? X squared. And what's my last term?
Negative 3.
So that goes in your last box. Now we call this our split b term because what's 1 minus 3?
2.
Negative 2, which is what my b is. So this is my split b. So positive 1, negative 3. And what does b always have behind it? X. So we have to put our variable behind it because that's your split b. Okay, in my opinion, that's the hardest part. From here on out, it's just GCFs and then you're done. So what's the GCF of this column? X. What's the GCF of this column?
Negative 3.
Negative 3. What's the GCF of this row?
X.
And what's the GCF of this row? Positive 1. Okay, now, this is the secret. If this box is negative, whatever box it's touching, if it's negative, it has to be negative. So like this is positive, so these both have to be positive. This is negative, that had to be negative. This is positive, that has to be positive. This isn't ever touching your factor, so this doesn't tell you anything, okay? Also, a way to check your work is by multiplying. What's x times x? Okay, x times negative 3. 1 times negative 3. X times 1. It should always give you what's inside there. So those are your factors. So x minus 3 and x plus 1. However, because A was 1, there's a secret that makes this easier. Okay, do you notice that this is plus 1 and this is just plus 1? And that this is minus 3 and this is just minus 3? Anytime A is 1, that's going to work. So do you have to do the box when A is 1? No. Can you? Sure. You don't have to. So let's look at number 2 so you can see what that looks like without the box. So again, A is 1 here, so we have A, B, C. What's A? 1. B,
Negative 5.
and C.
Negative 6.
So remember, A times C on top, B on bottom. So 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. B is negative 5. Now, when your top number is negative, you're pretty much subtracting to find your bottom number versus adding. So your factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Which one of those is going to subtract to give you 5? 1 and 6. Okay? Which one of those needs to be negative to create a negative 5? The 6. So this is positive 1. So then you could build your parentheses. My first term is x times x, or x squared, which is just x times x. And then my magic numbers, or my split b, is just plus 1. Oop, not plus, sorry, minus 6.
I don't get that.
So, because there isn't a number of x squared, this is all going to come out as x squared, so it's only x times. The number of is this, that number there, that number's that x.
You can also always check your work. So if you type what was given to you in y1, x squared minus 5x minus 6, and then what you came up with in y2, x plus 1, x minus 6, you can go to your table, and do you see how everything in y1 and y2 matches? That means I did it correctly. So that is my answer. No, if you put x minus 6, x plus 1, that's totally fine. Yeah. If you flip-flop those or flip-flop these, or if you wrote negative 3x here and positive 1x here, the only difference is you'll have x minus 3 here and x plus 1, which order doesn't matter, so that's fine. Yeah, so don't stress like if you're checking your work later today and you see minus flip-flop from yours, because it's the same thing. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Now, number 3, is it in order? Yes. Okay, squared, first power, 0 power. Okay, and does it have a GCF? No, because 3 is prime, 3 is your smallest number, 3 doesn't go into 7, 3 doesn't go into 4, so that is what it is. So we're just going to go ahead and find our A, our B, and our C. So what's A?
4,
B,
7,
and C.
3.
Okay, A times C is,
12,
and B is,
7.
what multiplies to give you 12 and adds to give you 7? 3 and 4. So positive 3, positive 4. When everything's positive, those numbers are going to be positive. Now, is A 1 here? No. So we have to do the box. And I'll show you why. So, remember, your first term was 4x squared. And your last term was positive 3. And this is your split B, so plus 3x plus 4x. Okay, well, what's your GCF in that first column? X. Now, if you struggle with finding GCFs, you can do, in your calculator, math, write 9, which with your smaller numbers, most of y'all don't struggle, but some of y'all, when you get to your bigger numbers, it can be a little confusing. So you can do math, write 9. Now, it does have some rules. You cannot type negatives, but you should know when to do a negative and when to do a positive just by the box it's touching, right? So we don't need to worry about negatives. And you can only do 2 numbers at a time. Okay, so we could do 4, 3, and it tells me 1. So if I have to take out something, I can only take out a 1. Well, here's 4 and 3, so I can only take out 1. Because these don't both have an x.
But how do you get the 4x squared in the box?
Because that's your first term. First term goes in your first box. Last term goes in your last box. You see that? Okay. So here, GCF is what? 4x. And here, GCF is what? 3. When they match, that's your GCF. So like if they're both 3, 3 is your GCF. Okay, so there are my factors. So x plus 1 and 4x plus 3. So the reason you can't just use what's in your table is because we would have wrote x plus 3, x plus 4, and that is not what this is. It's because when your first term is 4x squared, there's different options. You could do 1 times 4, you could do 2 times 2, and you don't know what it is. So you have to do something to figure that out. Okay? Any questions with that one? Okay, so I want y'all to start number 4. I'm not saying you have to complete it all the way, but try as much as you can while I take attendance the right way. And then we'll look at it together. Josh Brown, you alive? Let's see. No Xavier. No Joe. Okay, so hopefully y'all have at least this. Is everybody okay with that part? Okay, did y'all find this a little weird? Okay, you have a positive number on top, and you have a negative number on bottom. Well, 2 positives multiply to give you a positive, but doesn't 2 negatives also multiply to give you a positive? So you could have a double negative to multiply to give you a positive and add to give you a negative, right? So what multiplies to give you 24 but adds to give you 11?
3.
So negative 3, negative 8. Does that make sense?
No.
But when your B term is negative and everything else is positive, you have to have a double negative. Because 2 negatives multiply to give you a, that's how that 24 is positive.
And so we don't have to.
No, you do have to do the box because A is not 1. So what goes in the first box?
4x squared.
4x squared. And what goes in the last box?
6.
Positive 6. Okay, so then I have negative 3x and negative 8x, my split B. Now if you wrote negative 8x and negative 3x, that's totally fine. Okay, and what's our GCF of this first row?
X.
Column, whatever. X. And this column? Well, 6 doesn't go into 8. They are both even, so I know 2, but you could do math right 9, 8 comma 6, so it's 2. You'll see that? And what kind of 2 is it going to be? Negative. Okay, and what's our GCF here?
4.
4. What?
4x.
And here?
3.
Negative 3. And then again, you could do your quick check. Is negative 3 times negative 2 positive 6? Negative 3 times negative 2 positive 6?
Yes.
Yeah, and 4x times x is 4x squared. Yeah, and you can check the other ones if you want, but you don't have to. So my answer is x minus 2, 4x minus 3. There's a lot on the back, but we're not going to do all of them. And I got going.
Still got to do the practices.
You'll have more time next week. We have lots of practice days next week. There's no notes next week at all. Thursday. Because there's no school Friday. Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to do number 7, so look at number 8. Okay, so number 8, again, it's in order. Okay, there's no GCF. What does A equal?
1,
B
3.
and C.
4.
Okay, so I do this, and what goes on top?
4,
And what goes on bottom?
3.
What multiplies to give you 4 and adds to give you 3? So the only factors of 4 are 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Do either of those add to give you 3?
No.
No.
So is this possible?
No.
It can't be 1 and 4 because they're both positive. So they have to both be positive. So we call this prime. And there's a way to prove it. Okay? Because sometimes they're not as obvious. Like 4 and 3 are small numbers, so they're super easy to be like, all right, yeah, definitely prime. Okay? But there are some bigger numbers. Do you really want to list out all the factors to prove that it's prime? I don't either. Okay? So what you can do, we have this. And I want to know, does this look familiar?
Yes.
Okay, it's missing pieces, but this is a part of y'all's quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, which we'll do later. All over 2a. Do y'all remember that? Does that look familiar? Okay, that's a way to solve quadratic formulas, which we're going to get to eventually. Okay? But when you, I don't know if you remember, but when you would use this formula, sometimes you'd get pretty numbers. And you'd be like, all right, I didn't have to use that formula. I could have done it in the calculator or could have factored it really quick. Okay? So this piece right here is what determines if it's a pretty number or not. Okay? So that's why we only have to check this piece. So if this piece gives you a pretty number, then it's factorable. If it doesn't, then it's prime. Prime means it's not possible to break apart. So like there's no, like 7 is prime because what's the only thing that multiplies to give 7? 1 and 7. Okay, so that's the same thing here. The only thing you can multiply this by is 1 and x squared plus 3x plus 4. So it's prime. Okay, so let's prove that it's prime. So when I come to my calculator, I'm going to do square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And you see how it tells me non-real answer?
Mm-hmm.
That's because it's not factorable. Okay, it did not give me a pretty number, so it's prime. Okay, so we just proved that it's not factorable. However, if you look at this one is factorable. And if I were to type this one in there, negative 6 squared minus 4 times a times c. See how it gave me a pretty number? So that is factorable. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that is one way to prove it if you don't want to do all that other work. Yes?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, now look at number 9. We're not going to do number 10. Okay, so number 9, it's in order. Does it have a GCF?
Yes.
3.
Yes. 3 is the GCF. Why do you think it's super important to take out the GCF? Yeah, because right now, if we leave the GCF in there, we have to do the box because A is not 1. And do you really want to do the x with like a negative 90 on top and try to figure out factors of a big number like that? I don't. Okay, so if we take out our GCF, I have to write it because it's still part of my answer. I'm left with x squared plus 3x minus 10. So just like yesterday, I'm going to write my GCF down here, and I'm going to cross it out because I don't want it to confuse me. That's not your A value. That's your GCF, and it's gone. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, looking at this, what does A equal?
X squared.
No.
1.
1. What does B equal?
3.
And what does C equal?
10. Negative 10.
Mm-hmm. And we like this problem, why? No box. Why don't we have to do the box?
A is 1.
Because A is 1. So when we come here, we can do the x. A times C is negative 10. B is 3. What multiplies to give you negative 10 and adds to give you 3? Okay, y'all could probably figure this one out without the calculator, but hold. I'm going to show you the calculator trick because you learned this last year, and you're going to have some bigger numbers on your practice. So I'm just going to use this one to show you. So if you get stuck here and you're like, oh my gosh, this has to be prime because I cannot figure anything out, you can go to your calculator. You could test it, but then you tested it and it isn't prime. You can go to your Y1 and type your top number divided by x, and then a y2, type your top number divided by x plus x. So my top number on this one is negative 10. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to do negative 10 divide x, negative 10 divide x plus x. Everybody see that? So then you're going to go to your table, and you're going to have x, y1, y2. Yes?
X plus x?
Yes. And you're looking for your b value and y2, and then those will be your split b term. So here, second graph, what's my b value?
3.
Positive 3, not negative 3. So what are my numbers? 5 and negative 2. See how 3 is in my y2? So 5 and negative 2 are my numbers. Positive 5, negative 2, every single time. Okay, you go to your y equals, you type your top number. So my top number here was negative 10. If you forget your negative, this will not work. So if it's negative, make sure you type a negative, yes? So top number divided by x, top number divided by x plus x.
Oh, just x plus x?
Yes, top number divided by x, top number divided by x plus x. Okay, then you go to your table, and you look for your bottom number, your b value, in the y2 column. So if you look, my b value is positive 3, so here's positive 3. What numbers do I have to the left? 5 and negative 2. Does that make sense? Okay. So those are my numbers. And since a was 1, well, what times what gives you x squared? X and x. And then I could just bring these down. So plus 5 minus 2. So we like when a is 1 because we have less work. It doesn't matter. Oh, the 3 because that was the GCF that we took out at the beginning. Remember, that's still part of your answer. So we ignore it after we take it out, but we keep it for the answer.
So when we do the calculation method, we're trying to look for the b?
The bottom number, yes. B
Okay.
in the y2 column.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll show you another example on number 11. Now 11's a little weird. This is that like 1% where your A, B, and C will have a letter. Okay? So if you look at this one, you'll notice there's 2 letters. It's really not as bad as it looks. Okay? So I want you to realize this is just quadratic formula. It's just written with a y instead. So this is the same thing as saying ay squared plus by plus c. Yeah? So our x is now a y. So a, b, and c are just our anything that's not y. So what would be in front of my y squared if there was something? 1. Well, that's nice because we know all we have to do is the x. Okay? Now, what is here with my y? Negative 1 and z. And then what's at the end with no y? Z squared. So this is that like 1% of the time where you'll have a letter in your... I doubt it. I have to look at the test. I haven't looked at them in a while. So A times C goes on top. B goes on bottom. And let's ignore the letters for right now. What multiplies to give you negative 6 and adds to give you negative 1? Again, this is a simple one to find by yourself, but let me show you. So if I type negative 6 divide x, negative 6 divide x plus x, and I go to my table, I'm looking for negative 1. So see, here's negative 1, so it's positive 2, negative 3. Did y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be positive 2, negative 3. Now, what times what gives you z squared? Z times z. Well, what's 2z minus 3z? Isn't that just 1z, negative 1z? So did this work? Yeah, it multiplies to give you that and adds to give you that. So we're done. What times what gives you y squared? Y times y, and then bring down your split b. Huh? If you're trying to find your split b, yes. Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be?
Yes.
Oh, whatever.
This is too much.
Okay, 12, again, looks terrible, but it's really not that bad. This is the last one. Good. Okay, 12 it looks the worst, but it's really not. Okay, it looks terrible because you have all this stuff, right? And technically, if we really wanted, we could make it to where we double distribute, and we distribute this, we combine all our like terms, and then we factor. Do you really want to do all that?
Yeah.
I don't. So you can, and let's see if we get the same answer. Okay. I mean, you can really. Okay, so I'm going to say that y equals x plus 1. And I'm going to rewrite it with y instead of x plus 1. So I have y squared plus 6y plus 8. Does that look better?
Yeah.
Can you solve that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in order. There's no GCF. A is 1, so this is an easy one. We like these. What's B?
6.
And what's C?
8.
So cool. It's not a bad problem at all. What's 1 times 8?
8.
And what's B?
6.
What multiplies to give you 8 and adds to give you 6?
2, 4.
Yep, positive 2, positive 4. So I'm going to rewrite this because I wrote y squared. What times what gives me y squared? Y and y. And then because A was 1, can I just bring those down? So I have positive 2, positive 4. But we're not all the way done. I've got to plug it back in. Okay, well, do I have anything in front of my y?
No.
No, so is there going to be any multiplying?
No.
No, so I don't even need parentheses. I just have x plus 1 plus 2 and x plus 1 plus 4. Can that simplify?
Yes.
What's 1 plus 2?
3.
And what's 1 plus 4?
1.
Or 5?
Why'd you add the 1? The x plus 1 plus 4.
Because I had to plug that back in. Didn't y equal x plus 1?
Yeah.
So I just put that back, and there you go. There's your answer.
Yeah, we done. Huh?
So was it as bad as it looked?
Yes.